a nursing home that doubles as a memory care facility as well. So those are the types of places where we can apply for Medicaid. All right, the Medicaid that we're going to talk about. So if I am a single individual, I'm a single person applying for Medicaid in a nursing home, then I can have a certain amount of money. All right, and so if I'm single and I'm moving into a nursing home, I can have no more than $2,000 in my name. Okay, $2,000. That's total assets. That means checking, savings, IRAs, 401ks, cash value of life insurance policies. The total of all of that cannot exceed $2,000. That's what I'm limited to. The one caveat there is that I can have $2,000 plus up to $1,500, okay, $1,500 of face value life insurance. Face value is not the same as cash value. I'm really bad at describing what face value actually is. So when clients ask me, I typically tell them they have to reach out to their insurance policy. They have to reach out to the insurance company and ask what the face value of their policy is. I can tell you that I've been doing this for 10 years, and between my partner and I, we probably helped people with a couple hundred Medicaid applications. And I can tell you that I think I've seen maybe a total of less than 10 face value life insurance policies that were under $1,500. These tend to be just much older policies. And obviously, as we get, we get further and further out there, these old policies are just not, people are just not going to have them as often. So we can have $2,000 of total assets plus the additional $1,500 of face value life insurance. So that's what I can have as a single person. Okay, I cannot own a home. So technically, I can move out of my house, and if I have up less than $2,000, I can apply for Medicaid in a nursing home. But what will happen is that when my house sells, okay, so if I'm in the nursing home and 6 months later my house sells, well, guess what? I'm going to have more than $2,000 in my name, right? Chances are my house is worth more than $2,000 unless there's a reverse mortgage or some extreme mortgage, and or the house is totally underwater. But in most cases, when the house sells, I'm going to get kicked off of Medicaid, or sort of temporarily kicked off of Medicaid. And I'm going to have to spend my money down, right? I'm going to have to spend those sale proceeds down from the sale of my home on my care until I'm back under $2,000, and then I can basically apply for Medicaid again or get back onto Medicaid. Okay, so technically I can have a house, but realistically, you really don't want to have a home. There are some ways to plan around that. That's not what we're going to discuss today. It would be time for another talk. But there are ways to plan around that when we have a home, so that we can, we might be able to protect it. We might be able to protect at least some of the proceeds in a situation like that. So then we look at income. Medicaid says, Matt, you get to keep, if you're moving into a nursing home, you get to keep $30 a month of your income. If you're moving into a supportive living facility, you get to keep $90 a month of your income. Okay, the remainder of my income, which for most people that are applying for Medicaid in a nursing home or supportive living facility, chances are they're not working anymore. So their income is probably Social Security, a pension, maybe a combination of the two. I'm going to have to basically, after I get to keep my $30 or $90, depending on what facility I'm in, I can pay for my Medicare supplement, right? So if I get a supplement through like Blue Cross Blue Shield or some other health insurance company, I can pay for that supplement, and then the remainder of my income is what will be my financial responsibility to the nursing home or supportive living facility. Okay, but again, that's all I'm giving them, right? Because even if their monthly bill is $9,000 or $10,000 or $6,500 if it's supportive living, maybe I'm only giving them $900 because that's the remainder of my income after I pay for my Medicare supplement, and I get to keep my $30 or $90. So that would be my financial responsibility to the facility. And then lastly, there's a 5-year look back. Okay, and the 5-year look back is what gets most people. And the look back is, the way it works is when I'm applying for Medicaid, the state wants to know what I did with all of my money over the last 5 years. I don't know why I said 4. Over the last 5 years. Right, and really what they're wondering is, did I give any money away? And they don't really care why I gave it away. Okay, so in the Medicaid policy, there's language that says, any transfers for less than fair market value for the purpose of applying for Medicaid will be penalized. Okay, Now, the reality is, even if we were to make an argument and say, you know what, this person did not give money away for the purpose of applying for Medicaid, right? This gentleman was 68 years old and he had a stroke and wasn't expecting to have a stroke. He had given money to his daughter who was going through a divorce and he wanted to help her out, or he was paying for horseback riding lessons for his grandson. The issue is that the state, even if we go to that with the state won't care ultimately. If somebody gives away money, and the term, again, the phrase that the state uses is, if somebody makes a transfer for less than fair market value to somebody, then they will have a penalty. And I want to be clear about a transfer for less than fair market value, because I think we could all agree, I think everybody would agree, that if I wrote Kim a check for $10,000, that would be a gift. Okay. I don't think any of us would say otherwise, right? That would be a gift. But if I sold Kim my car that's worth $20,000 for $10,000, nobody would consider that to be a gift. All right. We would consider Kim to have gotten a good deal. But Medicaid would say that I made a transfer for less than fair market value of $10,000, right? Because I sold something that was worth $20,000 for $10,000. In effect, I gave away $10,000. Okay. And so when we give away money, here's what the state does, right? And so when I go to apply for Medicaid, when I go to apply for Medicaid, let's say I'm down to $2,000 in my name, all right, I'm otherwise eligible, I know how much of my income I'm going to be able to keep, and then Medicaid looks through my financials, because they're going to want to see 5 years of all of my financials. Okay, they're going to want to see literally monthly statements from my checking accounts, my savings accounts, my money market accounts, my brokerage account with my financial advisor, my IRAs, any paperwork related to my life insurance policies, right? Because they want to make sure I wasn't taking any money out of those policies, and what was I doing with them, or whatever it might have been. And so let's just say that Medicaid sees that I gave away $20,000, right? Let's say that I made $20,000 of gifts over the last 5 years. And it doesn't matter if it was 4 years and 3 months ago, or if it was 3 months ago. Okay, they don't look at this on a prorated basis. So let's just say that I gave away $20,000 over the last 5 years. And let's say that the nursing home that I'm moving into costs $10,000 a month. Okay, so what Medicaid's going to say, Matt, you gave away $20,000 and the cost of care of this nursing home is $10,000 a month. You gave away 2 months worth of care. So you need to figure out a way to pay for the next 2 months out of pocket. Then Medicaid will kick in and take care of you. Okay. So that can put a lot of people in a tough position. In some cases, people give money away, and people that we meet with give money away, and they can get it back, right? The gift can be undone because, they gave money to their daughter, they gave money to their son, and their daughter or son didn't really need the money. They just gave it to them because they thought that they were going to, pull the sheets over the eyes of the state. And believe me, very little gets past the caseworkers at the state when they look at these Medicaid applications. We've had caseworkers question checks that were written for, $243 and asking who they were, who they went to, what they were for, etc. So in some cases, we can undo the gift. We can get the money back to the individual applying for Medicaid before they apply to avoid the penalty. But in some cases, we can't. And in those cases, it's tough. And I really don't have a great answer, because what will happen is the state will approve that person. They're going to say, you're approved. But rather than Medicaid kicking in June 1st, which is when you want it to, because that's when you're moving into the nursing home and you want Medicaid to start paying for you, Medicaid's not going to kick in until August. And you need to figure out a way to pay for June and July because of the gift you made. And so in those situations, if that individual that's applying for Medicaid cannot get the money back from anybody who they gave it to, because the people that they gave it to needed it. They weren't giving it away for purposes of applying for Medicaid. They were giving it away because their son or daughter or grandchild needed the money. Then really what we're having to do is we're having to plead to the nursing home will you allow me to stay here for the next 2 months and just take my Social Security and take my pension? And, maybe we're able to get a couple family members to put together a little bit of money that we can offer you. But, are you willing to let me stay here for the next 2 months, paying you very little, knowing that in August, Medicaid will kick in and start to pay for my care? And those become difficult situations. I'm going to say, knock on wood, I have not had somebody come to me with that issue. We have not had that problem in our office. I'm frankly surprised we haven't, because I know that it happens, and it's a tough situation for somebody to be in. So I just want to respond. There's a comment in the chat box that says, only if the home is not private, a lot of homes do not take Medicaid. I'm going to respectfully disagree. I mean, that's true. There are places that don't accept Medicaid, but I would say that in the area that we live, there is definitely not a lack of places that take Medicaid. I think one thing to be very conscious of is that the only type of facilities that take Medicaid would be skilled nursing homes. And again, not every skilled nursing home, but actually more skilled nursing homes in this general geographic area accept Medicaid than don't. So there are definitely more nursing homes in our general area that do take Medicaid than those that don't. But as far as facilities in general, correct. I mean, the thing is, what we have to be conscious of, again, is there are a lot of long-term care facilities around us that are not nursing homes, right? They're assisted living. They are memory care. They're independent living. And those never take Medicaid. Medicaid will never be involved in any of those. So I just wanted to clarify the comment that was made. It's not incorrect. I just wanted to clarify it a little bit, just so everybody can understand. So we have the asset limitation, the income standard, the 5-year look back. But now, what if I'm married, right? So what if we have a married individual that's moving into a nursing home or a supported living facility and applying for Medicaid? Well, now I'm still limited to the $2,000 in my name. That's still all that I can have. However, my spouse that is living at home, and the term that we use is that they're living in the community. My spouse that's living in the community at home is allowed to have. So I want to make sure I said this. I can still only keep $2,000 in my name, but my wife can have $109,560. Okay, so $109,560. She can have a house, and there's no limit on what the value of the house can be. It could be a $150,000 house. It could be a $900,000 house. Medicaid does not have a limit on the value of the home. I mean, I've been doing this for 10 years. Most people applying for Medicaid likely don't have $1 million home, but it's not that they can't. Plenty of people that bought houses, back in the day for $20,000 that just aren't worth a ton of money now, and they are living month to month on their Social Security checks. So they can have $109,560, a house and a car. All right, so that is what my spouse can have when I apply for Medicaid. Anything above that, we have to spend it down. Okay, and I'll talk about what the spend down means in a second. As far as income is concerned, my wife can have a certain level of income. Okay, so she can have $2,739 a month of income, $2,739. So if her income is Social Security, let's say that my wife's income is Social Security and she gets $1,500 a month, I can actually transfer my excess income that I would have had to otherwise give the nursing home if I was a single person. I can transfer my excess income to my wife to get her up to that $2,739 number. Okay, so this is really important to understand, because there's a lot of clients that we work with where, based on their total household income, right? So if a married couple, if their total income between the two of them is less than $2,739, right, between both of their Social Securities combined or their pensions or whatever it is, then when I go into the nursing home, my wife will still get to keep all of the income. So she won't lose any of that. And I'll tell you, that happens, it's pretty often that happens. Right, obviously there's enough times when we meet with people with it, they have $4,000 of income between the two of them. And there is money that we have to give to the nursing home. But again, there are plenty of situations where, based on somebody's income, they may not have any financial responsibility to the nursing home. And that's really nice for those couples, right? Because, obviously there's a huge concern in these situations for the spouse, right? So the spouse that's at home, there's always a concern. Number one, I mean, first and foremost, their concern typically is that their spouse is cared for and cared for appropriately and doing well and in a good setting wherever he or she is. But that second concern is always financial. Always financial. So, if there's situations where, money is tight and they're living off their monthly income, it's always nice in those situations when the spouse that's living at home doesn't have to give up any of that income, and they can keep all of it and cover all of their monthly expenses that are going to continue and not going to stop just because their husband or wife is moving into a nursing home and applying for Medicaid. So if the income is over that though, so let's say that my wife's income on her own is over $2,739. Well, then all of my excess income is going to go to the nursing home, right? Above and beyond what I'm paying for my Medicare supplement, the $30 or $90 a month that I'm able to keep. But then the rest of my income will go to the nursing home, just as if I was a single individual applying. My wife, for the income that she has over $2,739, she will be able to keep the majority of it, but Medicaid does use there's a calculation that Medicaid uses where a portion of that excess income would have to be provided to the nursing home. It's a pretty small percentage overall. It's not something that happens often enough where I've memorized the calculation, but it is, again, overall a fairly small percentage of the income that would have to be used by the spouse. And then the 5-year look back. So the 5-year look back applies to both spouses. So it's not just because I'm the one applying for Medicaid. Medicaid's only concerned with my assets, accounts that are in my name. So when I go to apply for Medicaid, if I'm married, Medicaid's looking at all of our, sorry guys, I'm dealing with a pinched nerve in the shoulder, so I'm going to move my arm around a little bit today. Medicaid's going to want to look at all of our assets. Okay, they are going to want to see every single bank statement that both of us has. So obviously, I'm sure we'd all agree, anything that's joint, we would assume that Medicaid would want to look at. But, even if my wife has her own, she's got her own IRAs and her own 401ks, they're going to request copies of those statements as well. Okay. As a married couple, they look at us as one unit, and they're just as concerned if any money was gifted from an account that was in my wife's name only, just as much as they're going to be interested in gifts that were made from accounts that my name is on. And so it's not like we're going to get anything past the state if money was gifted from an account that was in my wife's name only. When we look at, so I mentioned that I'd get back to this. So I was talking about the idea of a spend down. So people, we have clients that come to us and, they've got $200,000, a house and a car. And, let's say the wife is coming to us. I always like to pick on the guy. So the wife is sitting down in our office, maybe with an adult child of hers, and discussing the fact that, her husband is in rehab in a nursing home, and that it's likely that he'll have to stay there long term. And the concern is that, it's going to cost $10,000 a month. And at some point, we want to be able to apply for Medicaid. So what do we do? And so, when we use this term spend down, because I think that it gets thrown around quite a bit, and I want to make sure that everybody's clear on what spend down means. So a spend down is when you have more money than what is allowed by Medicaid to apply for Medicaid, to qualify for Medicaid. Right. So as a married couple, if I can keep $2,000 and my wife can have 109 plus a house plus a car, let's just make it easy and say that, we can keep about $110,000 between the two of us. And so if we've got $200,000, basically, if we applied for Medicaid for me today, so let's say that I'm in the nursing home and we want to apply for Medicaid for me today, Medicaid's going to say, Matt, you're approved, but you have a $90,000 spend down. Okay. So after you spend the $90,000, then Medicaid will kick in. Okay. Or what we do is we don't even apply for Medicaid yet. And typically what we would do is we would spend the $90,000, right? We'd advise the clients, you know what, you need to make some repairs to your house. You've been talking about redoing your kitchen for a while, updating the carpeting in the basement, blah, 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 blah. You're driving a 20-year-old car. Now, as I'm saying that, I will not say that a car is a great investment. So people that are applying for Medicaid, because all the time I have clients say, well, oh, like, should I just go buy a $75,000 Mercedes because that I can keep a car and it's protected? And of course, my response is, yes, you can do that. But, buying a car is not the best. I would not probably say it's the best investment, because that car loses a ton of value the second you drive it off the lot. And so, typically we're going to advise that, they buy a reasonable car or some kind of car that they would have bought anyway if they needed a new car. This is not the time to start buying a fancy car when we never would have otherwise. But so in some cases, we might just say, listen, there might be some things that you want to spend your money on. One thing that we're a big advocate of telling clients is that they should prepay their final expenses. People can get weird about that and get uncomfortable when we bring it up, but it's an expense that Medicaid that's an allowable expense. It's not a gift by any means, and we know that we're going to have these expenses anyway. Right. And so for somebody that's going on Medicaid, where there can be a concern that over time they could be left with no money when they die, well, let's prepay for those final expenses now. Right. Let's make sure that we have enough money to bury them or to cremate them and have a proper funeral or whatever their wishes are. We can pay for all of that up front, and we can do all of that planning up front. And so that's, in most cases, we're advising that that's something that they consider. And if they don't want to do it, obviously that's their choice. We're not going to force anybody. But it's definitely something that we suggest, that most elder law attorneys would suggest that their clients do. Again, it's a way to, it's a way to pay for something that's going to have to get paid for anyway. Okay. So in some situations, we might just be looking at spending down some money. And so again, the spend down really just means that it's exactly what it sounds like, right? We're spending our assets down to a point where we can be eligible to apply and qualify for Medicaid. Now, in some cases, and I won't go into a ton of detail on this, there's another presentation I give where I go into detail on this. There might be situations where somebody comes to us and they've got, $200,000 or $300,000, and we're in the situation where, my husband's in the nursing home, it's going to be $10,000 a month. I'm 70 years old, and hopefully I've got another 20 plus good years. And is there a way that I can keep more than $109,000, right? This was our retirement. And so there is some planning that we can do for folks. I mentioned that Medicaid has a 5-year look back. And so, there are ways to plan to protect assets 5 years in advance, right? So some people, there's folks that we meet with that are in their 50s, 60s, 70s that are healthy, and they've looked at long-term care insurance, which we advise. We think long-term care insurance is great, but we've got folks that have looked into it, and because of some kind of pre-existing condition, they can't qualify for it, or they just think that for the amount of insurance that would really benefit them, it's just too expensive and it doesn't make sense to purchase. And so in some of those cases, there's ways that we can do some planning proactively to help protect assets in case, right? It's really more like an insurance plan in case they ever need to apply for Medicaid down the road. Okay, so we can do some planning, and the idea is that we're doing it early enough that we have at least 5 years on our side before they would ever be in a situation where they might apply for Medicaid. Okay, now let's be realistic, right? We know that the vast majority of people are not proactive, but not even that. The planning that I'm talking about, people just don't really think about, right? Most people don't necessarily have this thought of, what if I end up in a nursing home in 30 years? I don't want to impoverish my spouse, and I want to make sure that I can leave some money to my kids. Not that we don't want to think about those things, but we just don't, right? That's not a natural thought that people have. And so I will say the exception would be those individuals who have seen a loved one, maybe a mom or a dad or an uncle or an aunt. So the exception would be somebody that's seen a loved one go through a long-term care transition and spend, $100,000 a year for multiple years on their care. Those people then are typically more the proactive ones, right? Because they've seen what can happen and how expensive long-term care can be. But again, most people are not proactive, right? So most people don't come to us 5 years in advance. Most people come to us when, again, their spouse, when they're in a crisis, ultimately, right? When their spouse is already in the nursing home, and now they're faced with this idea of spending $10,000 a month. And so all I want to get across is that it is not too late to plan. It is not too late to sit down with somebody, whether it's me or some other elder law attorney. But make sure it's an elder law attorney, not just an attorney that specializes or concentrates his or her practice in estate planning. But it makes sense to sit down with an elder law attorney, because there are still ways that we can protect assets, help people protect assets at the last minute. Okay, we don't need 5 years on our side. Okay, it might be a little trickier. There's definitely going to be some nuances to it, and hopefully there's some specific things in place already that we can take advantage of. But it is not too late to have that discussion. And I mention that just because most people kind of hear the 5-year look back and they think that if they don't do something 5 years in advance, it's too late, and it's not. Okay, I can't stress that enough. It's not. I'm not going to say that there will always be a solution, but in a lot of cases there can be one. So we've got the spend down. We've talked about penalties. Here are some other things to sort of to consider, right? That I think are really important matters, and this is sort of all around the Medicaid arena, and some maybe not directly, but definitely indirectly. So one really important thing for people to know is the idea of rehab. So, because this is an issue that typically precedes Medicaid for a lot of people. So what happens, and what we see is, you've got somebody that goes into the hospital, right? For whatever reason, they fell, they hurt themselves, they broke a bone, they have a urinary tract infection, whatever it might be, fill in the blanks. And then they get discharged from the hospital to a skilled nursing facility for rehab. Well, when they get discharged to that rehab facility, it's ideal that Medicare covers their time there. However, certain things have to happen prior at the hospital for Medicare to cover the rehab. Okay, they need to have 3 overnight stays in patient status at the hospital. Now, they could be there for 7 nights. Maybe they're at the hospital for 7 nights, and maybe 4 of those nights were considered to be under observation. As long as 3 of them, they were considered inpatient, and then they get discharged to a nursing home for rehab. Medicare will cover the first 20 days of rehab at 100%. And then for a remaining up to a remaining 80 days after that, right? So for a total of 100, for a remaining 80 days after that, Medicare will cover 80%. And ideally, that person has a Medicare supplement that'll pick up the other 20%. So in an ideal world, for most people that are leaving a hospital and going into rehab, they've got those 3 inpatient status nights at the hospital, which then allow them to ideally have no out-of-pocket for rehab. Okay, now here's how that rehab piece works. Number one, let's go back to the hospital. Number one, you need to make sure you are asking questions when you're at the hospital. So if you've got a spouse there, or a parent or an aunt or uncle or somebody that you're advocating for, you want to be asking, what's their status? Are they inpatient? Are they under observation? I mean, these are very, very important questions to ask. We don't want to have somebody discharged into a rehab facility for rehab, and then all of a sudden get a bill for $20,000 for that first month. And it can be that expensive, because for rehab, you could be looking at anywhere from $400 to $700 a day for care. Okay, because in rehab, it's not like they're just a long-term care patient at a nursing home. They're getting PT, OT, other kinds of therapy and exercises that they're doing. And these are all things that cost a lot of money. Okay, so first of all, we want to make sure that we're asking the right questions. We know how this person's being classified when they leave. Then we also need to understand our Medicare supplements that we have. Okay, and there are differences between Medicare supplements and somebody who has a Medicare Advantage plan, there are very big differences as to how those plans cover that additional 20% after the first 20 days that Medicare covers 100%. Okay, so to restate that, if we meet the 3-night inpatient status at the hospital and we go to rehab, Medicare will cover the first 20 days of rehab 100%. Okay, so it doesn't matter what our supplement or Advantage plan says. However, that 80 days after that, number one, we are not entitled to the 80 days. If I have plateaued, meaning if I am not responding to the rehab anymore, if I'm just there at the nursing home, typically what's going to happen is they're going to the nursing home, their care team is going to have a meeting with my spouse or my adult children, who's ever involved for me, and going to say, listen, Matt's not making any progress. He's plateaued. The rehab's not making him get any better. In 3 days or in 4 days or in 6 days, Medicare is going to stop paying. And he can stay here, but it's $350 a day. Okay. So one thing we have to really understand is that piece, that we are not, even though we are entitled for up to 100 days, we are not guaranteed 100 days. And I can tell you that in doing this for 10 plus years, I don't think I've had more than 3 or 4 clients that have gotten 100 days of rehab covered. The other thing I cannot stress enough is that you find out the details of your Medicare supplement or of your Medicare Advantage plan. You want to understand how they cover rehab in a nursing home, right? When we get to that 80-day period. I know that your typical like Blue Cross Blue Shield supplement is going to cover the 20% is going to be covered by them. But I can tell you that I've seen Medicare Advantage plans where it covers days 21 through 40, and then there's a gap from like day 40 through 60 where the person's out of pocket, like $150 a day or something like that for the other 20%. And then the plan kicks in again at day 61. So these are just things to consider. And again, I know that this is not directly talking about Medicaid, but these are situations that typically precede the Medicaid conversation. And so I think they're really important to understand. And these are things that I think just kind of don't get talked about as much as they should. So some really good tips to have an idea of. The last thing that I want to discuss is the idea of private caregivers. So this is a big one because we see it extremely often. The vast majority of clients that we work with, for whatever reason, that come to us and that where we're having the conversation about Medicaid, if they've had caregivers, I feel like for some reason, the most of them have had some kind of private caregiver, right? So they didn't hire an agency. They hired somebody that maybe cared for a friend of theirs parents, right? And they were referred to this person. And so now we're using them for my mom or my dad, or however, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter how we found them, but they're paying this private caregiver, right? And so typically when there's this private caregiver, 99 out of 100 times, there's no written contract, right? There was no written contract signed by, the individual who's being cared for or his or her power of attorney if they were incapacitated, and the caregiver, right? And a lot of times it's, sort of an arm's length transaction. Sometimes the caregiver's paid cash, which is I don't love that. But a lot of times the caregivers just they're paid with checks, right? And they're paid every 2 weeks, or every week, or every month, and a lot of times people are using private caregivers because they're less expensive than going through an agency. Just so everybody has an idea, at this point, most private duty home care agencies are probably charging between $28 and $30 an hour for care. And I would say that the majority of my clients that have a private caregiver, not through an agency, are probably spending somewhere between $15 and $22 an hour. So it's a significant savings, right? I mean, especially when you add it up. I mean, figure for every 10 hours, you might be saving anywhere from $50 to $100. And for somebody that's, got 50 hours a week of care, it adds up, right? I mean, so I've got clients that are easily saving a couple $1,000s a month going with a private caregiver versus an agency. So I totally understand it. I get it. At the end of the day, I mean, this when it comes to paying for care of this all comes down to money. Okay, this all comes down to what we have, and different people can afford different things, right? We all know that, and so I don't fault anybody for that. But here's the thing: we've got to be smart about it. We've got to understand how Medicaid is going to look at this, and it's unfortunate. But what will happen in this scenario is that when we're paying, because we were paying that caregiver privately and we did not have a contract in place, when we go to apply for Medicaid, Medicaid is going to take the stance that I was just gifting money to this random person for the last 3 years. That's what their argument will be, that I was gifting money to this person. And so now it's an uphill battle for us to prove that I was not gifting this person money. This was a caregiver, right? This was not a family member. This was not a friend. I was not just giving this person money. But now it's going to involve having the caregiver sign an affidavit that, he or she was being paid to take care of this person. I have to sign an affidavit, but if I'm, as the individual moving into the nursing home, if I'm incapacitated, then my power of attorney, which might be my spouse or my son or my daughter, my power of attorney is going to have to sign an affidavit. And then we're going to have to, ultimately, to some extent, in a lot of these cases, argue and fight with the state that this is all true, right? And that we are not making this up. This is not a story we are providing them. And that this was in fact the caregiver. We just didn't have a written contract. And I can tell you that I had a client, I bring the story up all the time. I had a client early on when my partner and I started our practice, this is probably about 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago. I had a client who was moving into a nursing home. She was paying a caregiver. She had paid a caregiver over the 5 years prior to applying for Medicaid. She paid the caregiver about $450,000. His caregiver was living with her. She maybe she paid her, maybe it wasn't that much, but she had paid her about $70,000 to $80,000 a year. And so Medicaid basically approved the application, but they said that you have a $400,000 penalty. And so, obviously my client was down to $2,000. She had no money. There was no way we were gonna make up this penalty. So we had affidavits signed by everybody involved, and we argued with the state. And at the end of the day, the argument when we were on appeal with the attorney for the state, his argument, which I've talked to colleagues and they said that heard the same thing. The argument was, without a signed contract, how do we know that there was actually care? And my argument in response was, with all due respect, what you're basically telling me then is that I could put a fake contract together with somebody and pay them, and they could not even be providing me care. But because I have a contract, you're going to just assume that they were providing care, and you're not going to ask any questions. Whereas in this case, we have somebody that was actually providing care. We have 3 affidavits telling you that they were providing care, and your argument literally just rests on the fact that we don't have a written agreement. Clearly, the administrative judge agreed with us because we were successful, but it's unfortunate. We were lucky because I have colleagues that have dealt with the exact same set of facts, and because they had a different administrative judge or a different caseworker dealing with their case, their clients were not as lucky. And so what I cannot stress enough is that if we have private caregivers, if we're hiring private caregivers, if we already have a private caregiver in place, you need to put a caregiver contract in place. We need to have it memorialized in writing. We need to have the parties sign off on it. And it's okay to pay an adult child or a grandchild to be a caregiver. There's no issue. The state has no problem that a family member is paid as a caregiver. A spouse is not going to be okay. You cannot pay a spouse, and at the end of the day, if I'm paying my wife, which still wouldn't even make sense, and then I apply for Medicaid, all of her assets are accountable for me anyway. But there's no issue paying a child or a grandchild or a niece or nephew to take care of you, but there has to be a contract in place. Okay, even more important with a family member, because in those cases, it would for sure look like a gift, if not. Well, listen, it is 10:05. We have until 10:15. That is the information that I wanted to get through. I do see some questions in the chat box, so I can, or some comments, which I'm happy to comment on. I can comment on some of those first, and then if anybody else has any questions, I'm happy to entertain those. Is that okay with you, Kim?
Yeah, sounds great.
So, and Jerry, maybe you can clarify that comment. You said years ago your spouse can just take over what you own, a house, etc. When did it change? Maybe you can clarify that comment, just so I understand. Okay, well, I guess the way I read it is, a spouse can just take over whatever you own. I can't tell you when that changed exactly, but I can tell you that I've been doing this since 2011. And since 2011, Medicaid has had these rules in place where if I'm applying for Medicaid, if I'm the spouse moving into a nursing home and applying for Medicaid, my wife or my spouse is going to be limited to a certain amount of assets. And actually the assets that they were limited to have not changed since 2011. So I can at least say for the last 10 years, the spouse has been limited to $109,560, a house and a car. So I can't speak to what it was before that. So the next comment, houses alone are more than you are allowed for your spouse to keep. Yes, but again, my spouse can have $109,560 plus a house, plus a car. Okay, so I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. It was 3 to 5 years before you apply to turn your assets and home over to your spouse. That also changed. So when I started doing this 10 years ago, the look back period was, maybe this is what you're referring to, Jerry Block. 10 years ago, it was a 3-year look back, which meant if I was applying for Medicaid, Medicaid would want to see what was going on with all of my money for the last 3 years. I'm forgetting when it changed to 5, to be honest. It was not too long after 2011. I want to say by 2013, for sure, I think it had already changed and gone up to a 5-year look back period. The next question, from Jerry again, will they let you know what is going on while you are in the home so you can make decisions? That one's just a little too vague. I'm not sure exactly what we're talking about there. Ideally the folks, when we're at a nursing home, they should be keeping us up to date, especially maybe, this is my opinion on the rehab piece. They should be letting us know, when Medicare is going to stop covering us and when we're going to, be switched over to private pay. So yes, they should for sure be giving us notice. But I will say in a lot of cases, they don't give you a ton of notice. I've got clients that call me and they say, hey, listen, we just had a care meeting with the nursing home. And, while my husband has been covered by Medicare for his rehab, they're telling us that in 4 days, Medicare is going to stop paying and he can stay here, but it's going to be $350 a day. So yes, they'll let you know, but you're not going to be very likely to get, a week or more notice on much. So the next question, how are real estate taxes supposed to be paid if a person has no money? Person hopes to go home in the future. Can you clarify that question? J Merb, if you want to unmute yourself. Okay, so then I guess
I'll clarify the question for you.
Please.
We have a relative in a nursing home now. She is a widow, has no children. She owns a home. She went into this nursing home with the idea of rehab and that she would go home. Mm-hmm. It's taking a long, long time. She's been in there probably 6-7 months. They put her on Medicaid, although she doesn't ever remember signing anything. Now, how are her expenses supposed to be paid? They're taking her Social Security. They took her stimulus check.
So this is going to be one of those questions that I would have to answer at a separate time. It's just a little more detail, and
okay.
I'd have to get more information from you.
Okay.
I like to try to keep the questions a little more general for everybody else.
Thank you.
Feel free to shoot me an email. I'm happy to discuss. Yeah, those can be tricky, right, in general, because there are certain situations, obviously, where somebody goes into rehab and they think it's going to be a short stint, and they're there longer, and it does get tricky because if they don't have, some people, again, they have their home, but they're living. They have a house that's paid off, but they're living month to month on from Social Security and a pension to pay their expenses. And so if, in this type of situation, if they don't have the money, it definitely can get tricky. It definitely can get a little muddy, especially when the nursing home starts getting involved and trying to apply for Medicaid for them. And sometimes, almost sometimes like without them really understanding that they're applying for Medicaid.
Hey, Matt, I do have to jump in. I
Yeah.
know at 10:15, this is going to go into brain games.
Mhm.
So we will unfortunately be cut off here in about 4 minutes. So you
Yep.
give yourself about 3 minutes to answer the rest of the questions, and then
Yep.
we'll have to conclude.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Yep.
So Jerry Block, you had to apply and wait 3 to 5 years before you go into a home. So that I'm going to skip over that question just so I can answer a couple of these other ones. Feel free to shoot me an email, Jerry Block. My email's at the top of the chat box. I'm happy to try to answer some of these questions with a little more detail. Bill, as far as which facilities do not take Medicaid, it would be easier, honestly, for me to tell you which ones do, just because there's so many types of facilities out there. So the ones that do are some nursing homes, okay, and I would argue probably at least 50% of the nursing homes in this general area take Medicaid. So nursing homes and supportive living facilities, any place that's called supportive living. Any other facility, anything that's called assisted living or most memory care. I know of like maybe 1 or 2 memory care facilities that take Medicaid, but like any assisted living facility, any independent living facility, and the vast majority of memory care facilities are not going to take Medicaid. Okay. Roger, any idea what is the percentage of supportive living population that is using Medicaid? Roger, I have no idea, honestly, because you bring up a good point. I mean, just to be clear, even though every supportive living facility accepts Medicaid, not everybody that's in a supportive living facility is taking advantage of Medicaid, right? So there are plenty of people that are in supportive living facilities that are, they still have money and they're still paying privately. It's just like the nursing homes out there that accept Medicaid. Just because a nursing home accepts Medicaid, typically, depending on the amount of Medicaid beds that they have, right? Because most places have a certain amount of beds dedicated for Medicaid. You might have 50% of the nursing home where, hey, the person on the 3rd floor is paying $10,000 a month out of pocket for their care, and down here on the 2nd floor, I'm paying $1,000 of my Social Security, and Medicaid's picking up the rest of the bill. So it's a great question, Roger. I just don't have an answer for you. The one thing I will say about supportive living is we could use a lot more of them, because there are so many people that really need that level of care, that level of care that's a lot closer to assisted living, but that they don't have the money to pay for it. And there's just not enough supportive living facilities out there. A lot of supportive living facilities tend to require somebody to come in and maybe pay for a year or 2 out of pocket before they apply for Medicaid. So, all right, 10:14. Kim, do you want to take us home?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Matt. Just so you know, Matt speaks, I think once a month, right, for us. So take a look at our YES program on our YMCA website and you'll see him. Our next YES program is this Thursday at 11 o'clock, 7 mistakes that can ruin your big plans for retirement. So check that out. Again, this is free and open to the public. So if you have any desire to help the Y, we're always looking for help and support. Just go to nsymca.org. I appreciate you guys being here. And Matt, thank you again. Have a great afternoon.
You're welcome. Thanks, guys.
Bye, everybody.